Side Part. It's like a book club with your best friend, but make it a podcast. Welcome back, crawlers, to another episode of Side Part. I'm Nikki, your bookish bestie, and today I am so incredibly excited to begin our crawl through book number 5 in the Dungeon Crawler Carl series, The Butcher's Masquerade by Matt Dinniman. This will be part 1 in a 4-part series because this book is naturally divided into 4 parts. The only exception will be part 4, which will also cover the epilogue and just give you my final thoughts on the book and the series as a whole. I will also link all my Dungeon Crawler Carl episodes down in the description below if you haven't had a chance to watch them yet. And remember, all my thoughts, theories, reactions are just based solely on part 1 in this book and the first 4 books because I want it to feel like you're reading along with me. So I intentionally do not read ahead before I record these episodes, which means there will be spoilers for the first 4 books and part 1 of book 5. And also friendly reminder that these are very adult books with some very dark humor and some very dark scenes. I will do my best to keep it PG-13-ish for little ears, but please be mindful of your audience at home. Before I dive into book 5, I want to chat about a couple things. And the first is that Matt Dinniman announced that Dungeon Crawler Carl, a live-action series, is coming to Peacock. How are we feeling about this? I know Seth MacFarlane and Chris Yost are part of the project. I know that Matt Dinniman is part of the executive production, and I think he actually is going to be a co-executive producer for the series. I know they've done some extensive CGI work to make sure Princess Donut could look as realistic as possible. But are we excited for it? Are we worried that it's not animated? Are we not excited about the possibility of Jeff Hayes not voicing Donut or the AI? If I knew that Jeff Hayes was going to be voicing the AI in Donut, I feel like I'd be even more excited for it. I'm just not sure. I mean, the dungeon is just so chaotic and there's so many moving pieces. And when you're reading a novel, it's really easy to kind of pack all those pieces away and not let them get lost in the story. And I'm worried. Part of me worries that it'll get too watered down, but also because Matt is part of the project, I'm feeling relatively optimistic about it. And I'm just hoping that Jeff Hayes is part of it. I mean, I admittedly only listened to the audio for the first and second book because I started taking so many notes. It was easier to read on my Kindle and just take notes as I read. But I realized how much I enjoyed him being the voice actor, not only for Princess Donut, but also the AI as well. And I feel like it would be a huge missed opportunity not to include them. But anyway, let me know down in the comments below, what are we thinking about this new announcement with the live action series for Dungeon Crawler Carl? Moving forward a little bit, I want to talk about my last episode that I put out. So it was my final thoughts on book 4. And someone dropped a comment in my final thoughts video and said, hey, I think you missed something pretty big. And I think that thing that they mentioned actually blends into book 5 really well. So we're going to talk about it because here's the thing. When you guys comment hey, you missed this or you should have talked about this, I read literally every comment and I want you to know that. And I think it's wonderful to talk about things that I've missed. So please let me know down in the comments if I ever miss something or you'd like me to talk more about something. I always love getting that feedback. So what the commenter said was Carl issued his guarantee at the end of book 4. And did the AI accept it as a quest? I'm just surprised you didn't talk about that guarantee that he mentioned essentially. And I believe what they were referring to was Carl. It was shortly after he was towards the end of the book, he was announced the number 1 crawler. And then Carl is kind of taunting the viewers with the ring. He breaks the wall, if you will. And he's looking to the sky and he says, and I have the direct quote, "You guys see this thing? I'll tell you what, if you want it, it's yours. It's right here. Come and get it." And then there's an expletive. And I said I would keep this PG-13, so I'm not going to say that. Going back to Carl's quote, "Actually, you know what? I have a better idea. No need to come to me. I'll be coming to you. That's my pledge to you and to everyone else watching this. By the time the 6th floor collapses, every single hunter who dares to set foot on the same floor as us will be dead." And then Donut, Mongo, and Carl moved into the stairwell and he says something else. He says, "This, I swear on my life, one by one, I will break you. I will break you all." And epic quote. And I think I alluded to Carl kind of just saying all bets were off. And I can't remember the exact wording I used, but I do think it was a missed opportunity not to read that quote because I think it bleeds into book 5 perfectly. I think it really encompasses Carl's just complete abandonment of any pretense that he's playing along. Like, he is no longer, and I talked about this quote in my last episode as well, like, you know, books 1 through 3 especially, and even part of book 4, it's the dungeon happening to Carl, and then we see like this switch in book 4 where it's Carl happening to the dungeon. And definitely in part 1 we see Carl happening for sure. So this leads perfectly into book 5. So Carl breaking that wall, it challenges the hunters. Like, he knows that they're somehow in communication with people on the outside, and they know his every move at this point. They know what he's saying, what he's doing. And then this is something he continually and casually brings up all the time in part 1. And then we find out that's something that Quasar, you know, his lawyer told him to do. Like, it's been hard for Quasar to kind of challenge the fact that they have access to like all of this like information about like the crawlers' whereabouts. So he told Carl, like, make it a bigger deal, like, you know, make it kind of escalate this issue to the top, if you will. But before we chat about the meeting with Orsen and Quasar, I want to talk about just the overall vibes of this book to start off with. I just think every book has this like almost palatable, like, just feeling and sensation and overall vibe. And this book, I am just really in love with the way it feels so far. I mean, book 3 had like such a specific vibe with the Iron Tingle, and even book 4 with just like the bubbles and how there's like all these like interlocking worlds that kind of look like bubble wrap once you kind of peeled the bubbles away and started popping them. And it was just like a really cool experience. But so far, I think this floor might be my favorite. Just like everything from like the mushroom guards to kind of like this like jungle forest vibe. And even like this subplot with the elves, I'm really loving just like how this book is being set up so far. And I know I say this every book, but I'm just like really excited to read it. Like, when I say it was actually hard to stop at part 1 and film this episode because I wanted to keep going, but I promise you guys I would not do that. But nonetheless, like, I really just want to get this episode over with so I can dive straight into part 2. Going back to Quasar, when we first meet him, we met him after Carl kind of asked for a lawyer with the syndicate liaison Orsen. And then he gets Quasar at the start of book 5. And then Katya, I should also make mention, she was in this meeting initially, and that's when they obtained the gate from her. Now, there was something, actually, no, there wasn't one thing. There was a lot of things we learned from this meeting. So number 1, we know that Carl's party is no longer they don't want them having possession of the Gate of the Feral Gods. But we also know that they couldn't like actually take it away. We'll get to that in a second. We know that with the faction wars, like, there's different races, and we know the Dreadnoughts actually just decided to just no longer be part of it because they couldn't financially do it. And that was because of Carl's destruction of Laracos. So when I remember reading this, I was like, oh, he really hurt the Born Corporation financially. And then they needed Carl to willingly give up the gate because legally they couldn't take it. Like, so, you know, Orsen has this gate sitting there, but he's like, you need to actually like give it to us, but we're not like going to let you have it. And so yet again, we have like this weird like legal issue, but they're on this like totally gruesome, terrible like floor, the floor prior, like all these horrible things were happening, and they have no regard for like humanity or the human race, right? At this point, it's very clear, but yet they have like these weird legal lines they won't cross, and we're starting to realize Orsen takes his job very seriously. And we see all these other players on the outside like bending the rules, but Orsen is nothing if not a stickler for rules, which it was brilliant of Carl to even ask for a lawyer, because if it's in like their sort of like guidelines or rule book, like Orsen, I just am getting this vibe from him. And they say time and time again, like the Valte, or like the race that the Valte are very like, you know, sneaky creatures, but you get the vibe that Orsen isn't. You get the vibe that Orsen is like a hall monitor. Orsen is the hall monitor of the dungeon, and he might be a narc, but like he's also not a liar. At least like I'm assuming as much, but yes, Orsen is our resident hall monitor for the dungeon. You know, and I just mentioned when they were talking about the Dreadnoughts, you know, kind of leaving the dungeon because they couldn't financially afford the devastation that Carl caused. we then find out, like, Orsen dropped something like, hey, actually, you might have made them more money than you lost them. And that was kind of like, a knife to the gut. You're like, oh, like, really? And so I'm sure that also drove Carl as nuts as it drove me, but whatever. One thing we're also reminded of in that meeting as well is that crawlers actually gain some autonomy on the 10th floor. And I feel like Mordecai has mentioned that before. But again, like, we're starting to get closer to these floors. In the beginning, they're just like dumping and dumping and dumping all this information. But yes, once they hit the 10th floor, which is coming up fairly quickly here, they do grant some autonomy and they can make some choices for themselves. And we also know that Carl was offered the gate back on the 9th floor, which is also the same exact floor that Donut and Carl need to eliminate the blood sultanate, or Carl needs to make a decision to leave Donut, which in this part, he assures her that he is not doing it. I know he's hinted as much, or at least like kick the can down the road, like, let's deal with it when they get there. But when they get to Point Mongo, the town that like Carl and Donut took over and Donut became the mayor of, at some point, and we could talk about it a little bit more later, but Mongo takes off to go have relations with another dinosaur. And Donut is just devastated, and it just brings up this abandonment wound, and she's spiraling. And essentially, Carl assures her that's not going to happen. But this is after they take over Point Mongo. But we'll talk about it a little bit more later. Let's get back to our meeting with Quasar, shall we? I think Quasar is one of my new favorite characters. And I don't know if this is a proper comparison, but he's giving like Better Call Saul from Breaking Bad vibes, Saul Goodman. His decorum is lacking, but he does get some pretty sweet boons for Carl for negotiating the relinquishing of the gate until the 9th floor, I believe, which include mercenary quarters, and I think it includes for Sledge, Bamo, Clayton, and Very Sullen. And the newly hired mercenaries have some benefits too, which actually ends up getting Carl into a bit of trouble. And we will talk about that more later too. Transitioning a little bit, something I was like so excited for was the picking of the subclasses. And it was definitely chaotic when Carl was thrown straight into a meeting with the syndicate liaison. And Donut was like picking classes. It wasn't the same vibe as when they were able to pick their race and class earlier in the series. But nonetheless, I was so excited that Donut picked Legendary Diva because it's a bard class. And that was something I really wanted her to pick in the beginning. I think it's called a Necrobard, if I'm not mistaken. And I thought it would have been a really sweet class for her to choose. So I was really excited to see that she picked a bard class. It also came with a Constitution buff, which she so desperately needed. And I think I said that at some point in one of my episodes for book 4. I was like, my goodness, can we just like up her Constitution somehow? And Matt must have heard me. Even though this book was written way before I recorded these episodes. But I also think it's hilarious that she can't sing at all, and it's just atrocious, and none of her spells or enchantments are even working in this first part, at least. I think Donut is someone who has been rather adept at using like her enchantments and her spell work, and I think she's just been really good about navigating that. Like, she's so casual about like going through her menu and just using things, and she's been like really clutch in a lot of situations and seems to have no issues thus far, minus the Constitution piece. But now her character is kind of facing some resistance, and things aren't as easy for her, and I think it's really good for her story arc. I'm really excited that her character is getting a little bit more nuance. It's kind of having a little bit of a struggle moment. I think it makes for great storytelling. I feel like I should have mentioned this at the beginning of the episode, but we know the 6th floor is the hunting grounds, and is almost identical-ish to the layout in the 3rd floor. And we knew at some point, like, the 3rd and the 6th floor were going to be connected in some way, and we're definitely getting more information about that. We know the crawlers will be there for 17 days, and we know the hunters, if, they are unalived, they stay that way. So this is the one floor where that actually happens. It's not just for fun. There are some pretty high stakes for them as well. At the end of this floor, there will be a mysterious party called the Butcher's Masquerade with the top 50 crawlers as well. And at this party, you can submit the hands of hunters that you've eliminated for potential prizes or boons or upgrades. Like, it's still a little bit unclear. In Matt's description with like using them as like tickets was very macabre and a little weird. But you know what? I think that's why we love this books. We love these series for that reason. Like his descriptions and even like the AI is always a little bit unhinged. But like other pieces, I think they're always meant to add a little bit of levity, some really dark and gruesome situations. Before Carl actually goes in and picks a subclass, which was Agent Provocateur, he has this moment with an NPC janitor called Ian. And Ian is just so hyper aware of his presence in past dungeons and his former races. And he tells Carl, like, I shouldn't be telling you any of this. Essentially, I get in trouble when I break character. In fact, like, we were all previous crawlers here. But he also shares something important. He talks about how his brother was killed by a hunter named Vra, which was a mantis. And, you know, Carl kind of tucks that in his pocket. And this is important because she is a sister of one of the hunters Carl killed when he was, you know, on his unaliving spree in Zakau, which Bammel uses ability to transport him there quickly. And I know, like, Carl's intention when he went to Zakau was to kind of get ahead of it, and he was making good on his promise, right? He was coming for them. He wasn't going to be the hunted. He was going to become the hunter, which I appreciated. But he didn't discuss it with, like, Donut, Carl, and Mordecai. Donut kind of got the Reader's Digest as they were going there. And while Carl did do some, like, damage preemptively, I just feel like receiving credit for 34 or 35 hunters was just like a drop in the bucket. And I do feel like it kind of fractured a little bit of trust between Donut, Katya, and Mordecai. And even while Katya is leaving their party, they're still like friends and they still work together. And, you know, Donut has that spiral later on that we talked about. And I'm wondering if it's because she kind of feels Carl pulling away and just becoming like a lone ranger. And I know she also 100% sees that he just sends himself into like these situations all the time that have a high probability of taking him out of the dungeon, for lack of better words. But we know that the Hive now is enraged because Carl, one of the hunters that he did kill when he went on his, you know, explosive spree, was Vra's sister. And so now not only does he have the Skull Empire absolutely just coming for him, which we knew that. I mean, he's antagonized Maestro from like the beginning, but now he has the Hive on him as well. And so there was this moment. So Bamo transported them to Zakau, and he has this new ability where essentially he can teleport. But when they arrived at Zakau, you know, Carl ushers or tells Bamo to go straight to the personal space, go to the safe room, go to the personal space. But we know the issue with personal spaces is once you enter a certain location, when you exit, you're going to be back in that location. And so Carl, you know, him and Donut have to flee Zakau. They don't go back and like get Bamo out of the safe room, out of the personal space, and have them travel with him. So when they meet back with him in the personal space, you know, Carl has this idea like, let's just send him out with a bunch of explosives and you know, just him blow everything up. He'll regen on the next floor. And Donut's like, hold up, like, I'll just use my clockwork triplicate and we'll make one of him to exit. But as they're opening the door to, you know, wreak more havoc, essentially, they see this note affixed to the door with a knife. And, you know, Mordecai's like, don't touch the knife. And, you know, Carl probably, you know, thank goodness for Mordecai. That's all I have to say about that. But my goodness, I knew him worshipping Empress was going to come with some consequences. I knew this was going to backfire, but not only is Vra coming for him with a vengeance, we also know she had all the NPCs in Zakau worship Empress. So like Carl can no longer hurt them or target them. And not only is he being targeted by the Hive now and the Skull Empire, but he's also the #1 crawler and has a huge bounty on his head. I'm stressed. Like, I'm a little bit stressed, I'll be honest. Not like as stressed as I was in the Iron Tangle, though, oddly. But you know what? I'm still stressed. But I also feel like Carl is becoming even more capable. I believe in him. I believe in him. But my question is this. Why don't the other hunters worship Empress? Does that also preclude them from then hurting Carl because they're both acolytes of Empress? Like, does that same kind of qualification apply to anyone who worships as Empress. But wouldn't that also mean, though, that the guards couldn't hurt Carl? So it'd be like a mutual kind of hands off. I don't know. But obviously Carl doesn't want to get smote, whatever. I guess my question is, I'm not quite sure about the logistics around what it means to actually worship a god. And is this going to continue to backfire on him? Or are the hunters going to kind of, be fair game and not worship Empress? I just have questions. I have questions about that. I'm not sure how to neatly transition to this, but I want to talk about the takeover of Point Mongo. And I touched on it briefly before when I talked about Donut's kind of just spiral. But so much happened, like between the time they took over the town into the end of part 1. And so first things first, the Footloose references, and the bear imagery, and then them just tossing the mayor down the hill and then completely changing all the bylaws of the little town. Probably one of my favorite little scenes. And I really did appreciate that. But then Mongo shortly after just running off. And then he was actually Animal Planet mating with another dinosaur. So now we might have some baby Mongos running around. And so not only is Donut in her mommy era, she might very soon be in her grandma era as well. But then, like I mentioned, Donut just collapsing under the weight of abandonment, and then kind of having all these admissions of am I never good enough? Why does nobody like me? Why does everyone leave me? And questioning if she's just awful. And that was one of the most heartbreaking moments because, Donut, we think Carl's the strong one sometimes, but really Donut's kind of the backbone of the party. She's the one that reminds them time and time again they have it in the bag, no stress. The only time I've really seen her fray like this was when she was, underwater and freaking out. And I know she's not a human, but we see this humanity come out and just being so vulnerable with Carl. And Carl vows not to leave Donut, and he makes this declaration, and it's important that he makes this declaration because again, he's not the only one viewing this moment. They're being viewed by quadrillions of other creatures in this moment. So we know on the 9th floor, they must first slay the Sultan and then all the other members of the royal family before they can descend to the 10th floor. And by reaching the 10th floor, we know that they're going to gain some autonomy over their fate. And Carl kind of passing up on that in order to help Donut first is a huge deal. And we also still have the threat of B coming into the mix here soon, but we know they're going on Odette's show soon, which is also another reason I wanted to skip ahead to the part 2. I'm excited for the Vengeance of the Daughter. I really want them to go on Odette's show, and I want to see if she's going to bring B out, kind of like Jerry Springer Maury style. But you know what? I'd like to think her show's a little bit classier than that, but I wouldn't put it past her. Speaking of shows and PR and all of that, we see that Donut and Zev have been kind of maintaining this communication or relationship through the social media messaging boards. And slowly but surely, our Zev is coming back. And this makes me really happy. And we kind of get other hints in there that the Kuatin are actually really adept at kind of navigating these situations. So I have no doubt that Zev was not impacted by whatever sort of reconditioning that they put her through. But Zev interrupts at a certain point when he's talking with Donut and was like, hey, you guys are going on a show soon. And Carl kind of took that as code for hey, whatever you're talking about is going to get you into trouble. You need to stop. But Zev is still trying to protect them and still cares about them. And I'm just excited to see Zev kind of, just being Zev. And one of the last things that kind of happens at Point Mongo is Signet comes back. And Signet is, I'm how do I feel about Signet? I feel like wherever Signet goes, drama follows. And quite literally, I mean, she's part of a dramatic TV show in the dungeon. But the showrunners are not really, convinced yet that they want Carl to be part of the show right now. They're a little bit worried he's going to upstage Signet. And Quasar's hey, they're not they're kind of hemming and hawing essentially about signing you guys on. And Carl wants to be on this show because it kind of guarantees him a little bit more protection while he's in the dungeon. And so I'm interested to see how this is going to play out. How are Carl and Donut not going to overshadow Signet moving forward? with the storyline. But like I said, I'm really excited about like this subplot with like the elves and the storyline, and I'm really excited for part 2. I think it's going to be probably a lot of fun and a lot of chaos, but what isn't fun and chaotic about this book? But we know they're going to help Signet not only like try to reclaim her crown, but at least try to seek vengeance for her mother, i.e. the vengeance of the daughter. And now it's time for my favorite segment, my favorite NPC of the week. And I have not talked about him yet. I think you might be able to guess who it is. And it is Prepotente. Or now we know him as Pony, but we only get a short glimpse of the dynamic between him and Miriam and Carl and Donut. But my goodness, I think Carl and Prepotente or Pony's dynamic is maybe my favorite, at least second to Carl and Donut's dynamic. And then like the fact that they were the ones that helped them when they escaped Zakao, and they were trying to do the same thing. But I think Miriam and Prepotente are like the perfect parallel to Donut and Carl, because they're kind of both of these duos are just like these really powerful dynamic forces in the dungeon. But you kind of have Miriam and Prepotente who really take like these pragmatic and logical approaches, even though Prepotente is like a little bit unhinged sometimes. And then you have Carl and Donut that go in literally like guns blazing to like every situation. And I think it's funny that like they helped like kind of save them, or helped Carl like after the whole insane situation in Zakao. But I also love that like Prepotente like low-key kind of hated Carl. And like kind of hated how brash he was, and like it was just awesome. It was just so funny. And then I also loved how he went from like hating him to like wanting to be his best friend and like embracing him in a hug, and then the random goat screams, and my goodness, this is the hatred to utter devotion. I love it. I love Pony. And I cannot wait to just see more of Miriam and Prepotente as the series continues. And I really think we're going to get a lot more of them in this book, which I'm just so excited for. My favorite Donut quote from these chapters are when they are transferred to Zakao, and Carl chats Donut and he says, "Hey, if this goes south, just jump down the stairs. We'll regroup on the 7th floor." Donut's like, "It's already gone south, Carl. We don't attack the main bad guys in the very beginning. That's not how this is supposed to work." And I think like this seems like just like a whatever kind of chat, but I think Donut is very aware of the narrative that the dungeon is continually trying to push them down. And she's always toggling, like trying to manipulate the system, but also work with the system to get what she wants. And Carl is kind of just like, how can we just like, kind of say F you to the system as much as possible? And so they are a force to be reckoned with, but I don't know. I'm really, I think, just most excited to see how their characters continue to develop in this book particularly. I think this is shaping up, and my goodness, I'm only like 25% of the way in, but so far, this has been my favorite start to a book yet. Can we also just take a minute to appreciate like how insane his plan was? And once again, Carl like didn't include his party in his plan, and he embarks on this just insane, would you call it a side quest? I mean, not one that's given by an NPC, but this insane quest to destroy all the hunters with explosives. And I'm just like I mentioned, I'm excited for their character arcs, but I'm like really hopeful that Carl, especially in this book, and we saw glimpses of it in the last book, but he just really begins to like lean more on his party. And at least not on more, at least at the very least, I hope he begins to lean more on like Donut and especially Mordecai as this story progresses. And I'm also excited to see how this potential guild system can be of service to him or kind of help him a little bit more. There's some honorable mentions that I want to make note of as we kind of close out this episode. So first things first, I'm so excited for the Advanced Bomber Studio. I mean, I did not think we were going to get a glimpse of Carl's doomsday scenario in this book, and just kind of seeing like the anxiety when he pulled it out, but knowing that he gets to do like these simulations in this Advanced Bomber Studio and kind of see how he could use this like doomsday scenario. I'm excited to see how it's going to come into play in later books. I'm really excited to see like if and how he uses these simulations. I would be remiss if I did not mention Mordecai's new race as a pocket Kuma. He just sounds so cute, but like Mordecai is just like so grumpy, and I just feel like just like this cute little cuddly like gremlin bear thing with Mordecai's personality is just like the person. It's just like the perfect juxtaposition, if you will. Another thing I wanted to mention is when they were in Zachau and Carl was, beginning to attack the hunters, and one of the hunters was drinking a dirty Shirley. And I just feel like Matt has this really just adept way of using funny little anecdotes like that, like a hunter drinking a drink that Donut popularized. And it's a way to kind of like ease the tension a little bit in these moments of just like peak carnage and destruction. And it's kind of like that breath of fresh air you need before you're just like plunged back into the chaos. Speaking of chaos, I mean, Carl is starting to become more aware of like his brain, and he keeps making mention of like this river or this like stream kind of flowing through his brain. And I'm not sure what that is yet. And I know we're probably going to unpack that later on in the story, but I feel like it's important. I feel like it's worth mentioning. And I think it's going to come into play more and more here as Carl's kind of put more under pressure. Another thing that I feel like is really important to mention is Katya is just becoming more and more adept at like plotting. And she's really starting to distance herself from Carl. And I know that that's probably very intentional. But I'm also excited to see her kind of really take on a strong leadership role. And she's already doing that in this book. I also feel like if I did not mention this, it would be a disservice to Donut, but she's so excited for this pet beauty pageant for Mongo. I just think this storyline is so funny. And again, it's like that humor kind of laced in with this like gruesomeness and this chaos, but just having something for Donut to be excited for. I'm happy for her. Another thing that I need to mention, and I don't really know what this means. I don't think anyone does yet. But Empress appeared in the realm and then popped out again. And it was just something random that was mentioned. It was a notification Carl got. And like, what's up with that? I feel like it's important. Wouldn't be in there if it wasn't important, but like, what was that? What were the implications of that? I want to know more. And then I feel like I need to mention this part too, and I don't know where else I would have put it, but when they were in Point Mongo, and then one of the hunters was a dream hunter, and he was carrying an arrow of enthusiastic double gonorrhea, which I don't even know if that's a real thing. I don't think so. I mean, no, I know enthusiastic double gonorrhea is not a thing, but is double gonorrhea, can you even have it doubly? Where does Matt even come up with this stuff? I don't know. I feel like I just needed to mention that. It deserved an honorable mention. And then on that same hunter, Carl also finds like a crude map that the hunters must have, all copied. And essentially, the hunters kind of claim different territories and different crawlers. And obviously, it shows that the Skull Empire and the Hive have claimed Carl. Moving forward to looming questions, I have not talked a lot about this yet. And it's because I really wanted to hone in on my concern for this piece of the story. But I'm so concerned about Carl's use of the Ring of Divine Suffering. I'm hopeful that he will be able to resist like the power that the ring holds. And I just don't know if that's likely. And he already has like the nice spider web on his elbow now. And I know Donut hates it, but low-key, I think that's like the best thing that's happened from this ring. I think it's a pretty cool tattoo. But aside from, having some new ink, how is this going to impact him moving forward? And I don't think Mordecai would have had like all of these warnings and, have tried it. I don't think Mordecai would have been so insistent on him giving up this ring had it not have some major consequences and putting a huge target on his head. I guess this is something we're probably going to get answers to, but I just have this like sinking feeling that this ring is going to be around for a while, and it's going to be kind of a sticking point for at least this book, if not books to come. And my next question moving forward is like, how does this guild system going to work? I don't feel like we've gotten a lot of clarity on that. I mean, yes, they've dumped a lot of information about the guild and like what you can do. And now I think parties are limited to 30 crawlers. But you just feel like Carl's purposely trying to avoid becoming a guild leader. And I just wanted, like, why hasn't he wanted to adopt that role? I feel like Carl is kind of taking on this leadership role in the dungeon, but like, why does it feel like he's trying to like pawn this specific role off to somebody else. I don't know. That's something I want to know moving forward for sure. And lastly, join me next week as I chat about part 2 in The Butcher's Masquerade by Matt Dinniman. What did I miss that you'd like me to chat about in next week's episode? Let me know down in the comments. Also, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that bell to get alerted when there's new episodes. Thanks so much for crawling with me today. Bye.